Welcome to Learn HTML on Codecademy. This course is a course that will teach you the fundamentals of HTML. The outcomes after this course will be you will know all the common HTML tags used to structure HTML pages, the skeleton of all websites. You will also be able to create HTML tables to present tabular data efficiently. What will you build? You will build two projects, a fashion blog and a schedule for a wine festival. These projects will show how to put your knowledge to use in real-world situations. Why learn HTML? HTML is the foundation of all web pages. Without HTML, you wouldn't be able to organize text or add images or videos to your web pages. HTML is the beginning of everything you need to know to someday create beautiful web pages. So we will be learning HTML. Let us begin. So what is HTML? HTML is the language used to create the websites you visit every day. It provides a logical way to structure content for websites. So that's an important paragraph here. HTML is going to be the structure of our web page. Notice it doesn't say the styling, but it says the structure. Let's analyze the acronym HTML as it contains a lot of useful information. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. A markup language is a computer language that defines the structure and presentation of raw text. Markup languages work by surrounding raw text with information the computer can interpret, marking it up to be processed. In HTML, the computer can interpret raw text that is wrapped in HTML elements. These elements are often nested inside one another, with each containing information about the type and structure of the information to be displayed in the browser. Hypertext is text displayed on a computer or device that provides access to other text through links, also known as hyperlinks. In fact, you probably clicked on many hyperlinks on your path to this Codecademy course. Let's get started. Instructions. In the code editor to your right, type your name in between H1 and the closing H1, then press run. So here's our editor. Here, when we run our editor, it should print whatever we place in here on this screen. So it just says type your name in between the opening H1 and closing H1. So here, we would, inside of our tags, we just type our name. So now if I run this, you see we get a heading 1 with my name in it. So I could go next. Doc type. Whether you realize it or not, when you read text, your brain must first identify the text language. If you can understand that language, then your brain immediately begins to interpret the text. This same process happens whether you're reading a street sign, a book, or a name tag. Web browsers work in a similar way. They must know what language a document is written in before they can process its contents. We can let web browsers know that you are using HTML by starting your document with a document type declaration. The declaration looks like this. So here's our doc type declaration, and we see it here. This declaration is an instruction. It tells the browser what type of document to expect along with what version of HTML is being used in the document. Doc type HTML must be the first line of code in all of your HTML documents. If you don't use the declaration, your HTML code will likely still work. However, it is risky. For now, the browser will correctly assume that the HTML in doc type HTML is referring to HTML5 as it is the current standard. In the future, however, a new standard will override HTML5. Future browsers may assume you're using a different newer standard, in which case your document will be interpreted incorrectly. To make sure your document is forever interpreted correctly, always include the doc type declaration at the very beginning of your HTML documents. Instructions. On the first line of index.html, add doc type HTML. It looks like it was placed in there for us already. So let us just run this. And we did pass. Let's go to the next one. This is just every time that we create an HTML document, we want to start it with our doc type declaration. This allows the browser to know that the file is a HTML document. Preparing for HTML. Great. Browsers that read your code will know to expect HTML when they attempt to read your file. The doc type declaration is only the beginning, however. It indicates to the browser that you will use HTML in the document, but it doesn't actually add any HTML structure or content. To create HTML structure and content, we must add opening and closing HTML tags like so. So we have an opening HTML and our closing HTML. Everything within here will be our document code. Anything between the opening HTML and closing HTML tags will be interpreted as HTML code. Without these tags, it's possible that browsers could incorrectly interpret your HTML code. Instructions. After the doc type HTML declaration, add opening and closing HTML tags. So HTML opening and HTML closing. So that is this one. Let us run. We did pass. Let us continue. So we have our doc type declaration. Lets the browser know this is a document of HTML. Then we put our opening and closing HTML tags, and everything within it will be interpreted as HTML. Let us go next. So HTML anatomy. Before we move forward, it's important that we discuss how HTML elements are structured. The diagram to the right displays an HTML paragraph element. In this example, the paragraph element is made up of one opening tag, the hello world text, and a closing tag. Let's quickly review each part of the tag pictured. 1. The HTML tag is the element name surrounded by an opening and closing angle bracket. So our HTML tag is a P tag. The HTML element, or simply element, is a unit of content in an HTML document formed by HTML tags and the text or media it contains. So the whole thing from the P opening to the P closing and the text or media it contains, hello world, is all an HTML element. 3, an opening tag is the opening here, the P, which is the first tag used to start an HTML element. The tag type is surrounded by opening and closing angle brackets. 4, element content. The information, text or other elements contained between the opening and closing tags of an HTML element. And 5 is our closing tag, the second HTML tag used to end an HTML element. Here's our closing tag. Closing tags have a / inside of them, directly after the left angle bracket. Most elements require both opening and closing tags, but some call for a single self-closing tag. We'll encounter examples of both element types in the next few exercises. So study this diagram. To the right, learn more about HTML syntax. But basically, the whole thing's our element. We have our opening tag, closing tag, and these are the angle brackets. So let's go next. So the head, so far you've done 2 things. 1, declare to the browser that your code is HTML. 2, added the HTML element that will contain the rest of your code. So let's also give the browser some information about the page. We can do this by adding a head element. A head element contains the metadata for a web page. Metadata is information about the page that isn't displayed directly on the web page. You'll see an example of this in the next exercise. The opening and closing head tags typically appear as the first item after your first HTML tag. So add an empty head element between the opening and closing HTML tags. So, like it said, our head goes right under here, and then it's closed here, and in between the head usually is the information that isn't displayed in the body. Like everything you read here on this whole page is part of the body, which we'll get into in the next lessons. But the head has information like the title of our web page, which usually appears as a tab. When you open multiple tabs, the title that is displayed on each tab is usually shown, or is usually put in the head. But again, we'll probably learn more in the following lessons. Just know that this is a head tag. and it is inside of our HTML tag. And again, this is building structure. Let us go to the next one, run this. It'll make more sense on the following lessons. Page titles. What kind of metadata about the web page can the head element contain? If you navigate to the Codecademy catalog and look at the top of your browser or at the tab you have open, you'll notice the words All Courses, Learn to Code Interactively, Codecademy, which is the title of the web page. The browser displays the title of the page because the title can be specified directly inside of the head element by using a title tag. As you can see here, we have our doc type declaration, and then our HTML document code is inside of the HTML tags. Then we have our head, which contains data title, which will usually show up on our tabs, and it's just the title of that web page. If we were to open a file containing the HTML code in the example above, the browser would display the words My Coding Journal in the title bar or in the tab's title. Instructions. Add a title to your web page using the title element. The title can be anything you'd like. Fortunately, you won't be able to see the title of your page in the smaller browser to the right. We'll show you what it looks like on the next exercise. Cool. So let's just make our title and anything you'd like, and then end title. I could change this to my page. So if we run this, we did pass. We're not able to see it in their browser, but like it said on the next one, we shall see. Where does this appear? So as you guys can see in the tab, this is usually where the site title will show. If the browser within the environment had a title bar, you'd see the title of the web page you added where it appears in the image to the right. So let us continue. We've added some HTML, but still haven't seen any result in the web browser to the right. Why is that? Before we can add content that a browser will display, we have to add a body to the HTML file. Only content inside the opening and closing body tags can be displayed to the screen. Once the file has a body, many different types of content, including text, images, and buttons, can be added to the body. So we have here body added right under our head. In the example above, the opening tag body is placed directly below the closing head tag, head. And then closing body tag is placed directly above the closing HTML tag. Add a body to your web page using the body element. Go under the head, put a body, closing body, run. We did pass our first test. Second, add the following code between your opening and closing body tags. So we go into our body, we put a paragraph tag. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. So we added this paragraph. So now when I run this, it should print a paragraph here inside the body of our web page. Let us run. And as you guys can see, it did print it, but I must have typed something wrong. Let's just copy it exactly because I might have typed a space wrong or something similar. So let us just paste and run. Now it did pass, so it seemed to be like a spacing error or something. But as long as you guys can see, within our body tag, we start adding the content we want on our page. HTML is allowing us to structure things in a certain order that is easy to interpret with the browser so that we can display things nicely on our page. Continue next. Self-closing tag. Thus far, we've only seen HTML elements with an opening and a closing tag. A few types of elements, however, require only one tag. Self-closing elements contain all the information the browser needs to render the element inside a single tag. Also, because they are single tags, they cannot wrap around raw text or other elements. The line break element, BR, is one example of a self-closing tag. You can use it anywhere within your HTML code. The result is a line break in the browser. So line 1, then we have a break, and line 2. In the example above, the paragraph tags enclose two phrases split by a break tag. Note that single tags, unlike elements with two tags, can't wrap around raw text or other elements. The code in the example above will result in an output that looks like the following: line 1, line 2. Without the break tag, the browser would render line 1 and line 2 on the same line. Add a self-closing break tag after the question mark. So if we go here, question mark would be there. They just want us to add a break tag. So if we go ahead, run this, now we have our paragraph on 2 lines. HTML structure. The rest of the lesson will focus on how HTML is structured and some tools developers use to make code easier to interpret. HTML documents are organized as a collection of parent-child relationships. When an element is contained inside another element, it is considered the child of that element. The child element is said to be nested inside of its parent element. So we have a body and then a paragraph inside of the body. In the example above, the paragraph element is nested inside the body element. The paragraph element is considered a child of the body element. The paragraph element is considered a child of the body element, the parent. Since there can be multiple levels of nesting, this analogy can be extended to grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and beyond. Let's consider a more complicated example. So we have our body, which has a div, and inside that div, there's an h1 and a paragraph. In this example, the body element is the parent of the div, so the div is a child of the body. Both the h1 and the p element are children of the div element. Because the h1 and p element are in the same level, they are considered siblings and are both grandchildren of the body element. Understanding this hierarchy is important because child elements can inherit attributes from their parent element. Instructions say add the paragraph below as a child of the div element. So we have this paragraph. We could just copy it, but they want it to be a child of the div. The div is here. Since it is a child and it's inside of the div, it's usually good practice to double space and then paste. So let us run this. So now our paragraph is inside of a div. Add the paragraph below as a child of the body element. So we take this, also copy. It doesn't say where in the body, but if it needs to be a child of the body, then anywhere would be okay. So we can just put it there. So now if I run it, it did go. We passed. And now, as you guys can see, it was placed at the top since we put it right at the beginning of the body. So let us go, continue going. We're just learning about element relationships. So if we look at all this, the paragraph is a child of the body, as is this h1 that says hello world. The div, the h1, and the paragraph are all siblings since they're on the same level. Within the div has children, a child, paragraph element. If we continue, white space. As the code in an HTML file grows, it becomes increasingly difficult to keep track of how elements are related. Programmers use two tools to visualize the relationship between elements, white space and indentation. Both tools take advantage of the fact that the position of elements in a browser is independent of the amount of white space or indentation in the index.html file. For example, if you want to increase the space between two paragraphs on your web page, you would not be able to accomplish this by adding space between the paragraph element in index.html file. The browser ignores white space in HTML files when it renders a web page, so it can be used as a tool to make code easier to read and follow. What makes the example below difficult to read? We have our body, our paragraph 1, and then paragraph 2, and then the body. You have to read the entire line to know what elements are present. Compare the example above to this. Body, and then paragraph 1, paragraph 2. This example is easier to read because each element is on its own line, while the first example required you to read the entire line of code to identify the elements. This example makes it easy to identify the body tag and 2 paragraphs. A browser renders both examples the same way. In the next exercise, you will learn how to use indentation to help visualize nested elements. Instructions. Use whitespace to make the code more reliable by putting each element on its own line. So here, body's on its own line, then our heading is in its own line, our paragraph, and then the body at the bottom. So this helps better than how it was, because we could see it's a body, an H1, and a paragraph. So if I run, looks the same, just organized better. So go next. Indentation. A second tool web developers use to make the structure of code easier to read is indentation. The World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, is responsible for maintaining the style standards of HTML. At the time of writing, the W3C recommends 2 spaces of indentation when writing HTML code. Although your code will work without exactly 2 spaces, this standard is followed by the majority of professional web developers. Indentation is used to easily visualize which elements are nested within other elements. As you guys can see here, within the body, then there's 2 spaces, paragraph. And then we have our div. Since it is inside of the paragraph, it is not indented. But then the div within it has another paragraph. This would be indented to show us that it is nested within the div. In the example above, paragraph 1 and the div tag are nested inside of the body tag, so they are indented 2 spaces. The paragraph 2 element is nested inside of the div tag, so it is indented an additional 2 spaces. The spaces are inserted using the spacebar on your keyboard. Indent the code in index.html to match W3C standards. Not sure if I can do this, but let's try. So highlight this and then just press tab, and it did work. We have a div. Inside of it, there's a P tag. We want to go ahead, tab it. Well, it said 2 spaces. I did tabs to make it easier. But now, if I run this, we did pass. So indentation just makes it a lot easier to read what's going on than if everything was straight on the same line. We wouldn't know what is nested in what. Next, comments. HTML files also allow you to add comments to your code. Comments begin with angle bracket, exclamation point, dash dash, and end with dash dash, closing angle bracket. So there's a comment that the browser will not display. Including comments in your code is helpful for many reasons. They help you and others understand your code if you decide to come back and review it at a much later date. They allow you to experiment with new code without having to delete old code. And this second one comes in handy a lot when you're just messing around trying to find either bugs or trying something new. You don't exactly want to erase your code, so you comment it out. The example, the comment is used to denote that the following text makes up a particular section of the page. In the example above, this one, a valid HTML element, a paragraph element, has been commented out. This practice is useful when there's code you want to experiment with or return to in the future. So add a comment to index.html, explain the purpose of the code. So here we denote our comment like that, and then we can say my site's title, and then we end the comment like that. So this would just be a comment explaining this line. So add a comment, explain the purpose of the code. We run that, that's our comment, passed it, review. Congratulations on completing the first lesson of HTML and CSS. You are well on your way to becoming a skilled web developer. Let's review what you've learned so far. 1. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language and is used to create the structure and content of a web page. 2. Most HTML elements contain opening and closing tags with raw text or other HTML tags between them. 3. Single closing tags cannot enclose raw text or other elements. 4. Comments are written in HTML using the following syntax. So that's a comment. 5. HTML elements can be nested inside other elements. The enclosed element is the child of the enclosing parent element. 6. White space between HTML elements helps make code easier to read while not changing how elements appear in the browser. 7. Indentation also helps make code easier to read and makes parent-child relationships visible. 8. The doc type HTML declaration should always be the first line of code in your HTML files. 9. The HTML element will contain all of your HTML code. 10. Information about the web page, like the title, belongs within the head of the page. 11. You can add a title to your web page by using the title element inside of the head. 12. A web page's title appears in a browser's tab. 13. Code for visible HTML content is placed inside of the body element. What you learned in this lesson constitutes the required setup for all HTML files. The rest of the course will teach you more about how to add content using HTML. 1. Add a body to the web page. So we learned body goes under the head and its closing tag. So that's the first instruction. Run it. Passed. 2. Copy and paste the following line of code within the body of the index.html file. Copy it, indent, paste, and now we have our heading 1 with hello world inside of our body. We run this, we get our hello world. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. We did reach our first achievement, and that was the first part of Learn HTML on Codecademy. This was elements and structure. I'll see you guys on the next one.